Hey everybody, it's Joe Trippi, and welcome back to That Trippi Show with my co-host, Alex Sashlow. This week, turns out that when your tariffs are tanking the economy and then you announce that you're not doing the tariffs for a while, the market's like that. Who knew? But it looks like we're giving some of that back. We'll talk about that and what else is going on. Alex, where do you want to get started?
I do want to give some unsolicited financial advice, which is don't do what we do and check the markets like 8 times a day. It's not healthy. It's not a good idea. Depending on your risk tolerance, there are professionals that can help you with this. There are probably people listening to this that need to hear that over and over again. I know I do sometimes. That said, we're recording this at our usual time on Thursdays, and well, that gain from yesterday was pretty short-lived, Joe. We're already down a couple points, and it looks like it's going to continue. The markets clearly hated Liberation Day, which I believe we talked about a little bit last week. Since our last recording, I think they're down 15, 20%, pretty much across the board. They've pretty much continued following, except for that brief pause you mentioned yesterday. Trump kind of called timeout yesterday, which
He
not
caved.
he totally caved, which I
Yeah.
honestly wasn't expecting. 90-day pause on most tariffs, except one country notably, which we'll talk about. But what happened? You think he caved?
He absolutely did. I mean, they went in. They went in and told him that you might want to take a look at the bond markets. And, the yields were clearly out of whack. The yields were growing and bonds were declining. That's always a bad sign. People, when they're fleeing the stock market, they go to things like gold and bonds, and both gold and bonds were sinking as well. That could be a very big problem. I mean, a problem you do not. I mean, falling stock market is one thing, but bonds going the direction they were going, particularly, our debt. The Chinese buy a lot of those bonds. If they decide to not show up to the auction, that's a pretty big problem. So we're not sure
Do you think it
what
was
it
the
was.
Chinese? It was it the
No, it
fear
was
of the
Japan.
Chinese?
No, it was Japan. Japan was selling our bonds, according to everything I'm seeing. So, but there was a fear, I think. I mean, one, that you don't want people selling bonds when the market's going down. I mean, the reality met, you know, Donald Trump's fantasy of beautiful tariffs met reality. And the world was saying, go pound sand in different ways, selling bonds. But that was the danger. That was a dangerous sign. And I think it's clearly what propelled. I mean, he said that himself pretty much. That's what caused him to, as he put it, caused him to put a pause on it. But look, there's still 10% tariffs across the board. China tariffs are still, way up, and it seems to all be escalating there. We're in a trade war with China for sure, and we're in and we've stuck a 10% tax on everything that Americans consume from abroad, and there's plenty of it, whether it's sneakers from Vietnam, and that's the whole thing. We basically, companies like Nike had moved a lot of their manufacturing from China to Vietnam, based on doing what they were instructed to do, move out of China. And a lot of companies were already doing this stuff on their own. And a lot of the chip manufacturing companies, with the CHIPS Act, Biden, were already moving here to places like Ohio and Arizona. So a lot of that was already happening. But so a company like Nike, who, love him or hate Nike, they were doing exactly was already, what was already for them, what they had gotten guidance from the last go around with Trump in 2016. They had moved from China to Vietnam, and then you punish them by doing, and American consumers, because I'm not sure. The one thing that, because this is so haphazard, the question is, do we really want sneaker manufacturing here in the US with all the sundry problems that come with that kind of manufacturing, the chemicals, et cetera? Do we really want that here? And do we really want to punish Vietnam for for and Nike for doing what they did. So it's still very haphazard. It's still not going to, okay, so 90 days from now, you know, we're going to go through this all again, right? Is he going to put them all on? Were their deals cut? Whatever is going on, there's still very little certainty. And, no, I think there's a lot of certainty now. The Europe is certain that Donald Trump is with Putin and is not going to defend them or Ukraine, that they can't count on it. They're certain that they can't count on it. And so, they're certain that are Canada, Mexico, no matter what, he drops them all. Vietnam, all of them, they get dropped. They're certain they can't count on the United States as a trading partner, that they can't count on that. So they'll be starting to cut multilateral deals amongst each other to create better trade for themselves with the rest of the world, and knowing they can't count on us, having a stable relationship with us trade wise. So all these things are pretty certain. And I think that's all going to lead to we'll see, but particularly the Chinese tariffs are, Jim Cramer, I think, put it correct today.
It's a bad sign when you're waking up and watching Jim Cramer.
Yeah, I know, but no, but he said, look, it's a blockade. It's not a tariff. I mean, we're basically what we've done is put up a blockade. Nothing from China will get into the United States. There's a few problems with that. A lot of the components or even original ingredients, whether it's rare earths or other things, or pharmaceutical materials that then become part of our drug supply chain. Yes, those things need to be, and again, after COVID, that was already happening as well. But with a blockade, none of that is, even the component parts that were helping move things here are probably, well, one, if a company has to pay that tariff for not the pharmaceutical itself, but the chemical, the ingredients, whatever, that is going to raise the price of those pharmaceuticals, those medicines, or the devices that component part is necessary. Even auto parts, to some extent, may be temporarily until you build plants here that can do some of that stuff. It's going to be a hit in, inflationary, et cetera. So no, we're not out of the Trump chaos with the economy. And I do recall our friend Rick Wilson, who coined the phrase, everything Trump touches dies. And now he's touching the American and world economy. So that should give everybody pause. But the good news in all of that, if you can find any good news, is that it does seem once and for all to finally be eroding his support, even with some MAGA folks who are starting. I mean, farmers, you're starting to see anecdotal evidence, I think, and hopefully we'll see it in more empirical data. But there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that people are starting to question whether they made the right decision by supporting him or not, and that could be eroding.
Let's get into that. And I'm going to add my own flavor to this question from B in New York, who asks, there's no way that any meaningful amount of Trumpies or Trump supporters have had enough yet, right? And I know you're starting to get there. The one thing I'd add, and I'd want to ask first, is it possible? And again, you and I have spent a lot of time this week talking to people across the aisle on the other side on a lot of this stuff. And, is it possible that the tariffs were a good idea, long overdue, that was just executed poorly?
No, I don't believe that at all. I believe the tariffs were a horrible idea, and I believe they were executed exactly the way Trump wanted them to be executed.
Well, right. No, yeah, of
and
course, but that was
no,
always going to be a bad
no, and then
execution.
but then he, now he's doing the usual I didn't fail. Everybody, again, who was it? I can't remember, but somebody posted yesterday that, or said something on one of the financial talk shows that I'd like to, a strong, somebody who would normally be considered a Trump supporter said, look, I'd like to tell the American people that Trump conquered the world with this, but that's not what happened here. He threw the towel in. And so, yeah, it was a hell of a lot of pain, trillions of dollars in losses. Some people will never get those back because they sold, or had to because, they're in retirement and they couldn't, don't want to take the chance anymore. And so some of them will never, many will get it all back eventually, whether it's, 6 months, 2 years, 4 years, whatever, assuming we're still around in terms of how the markets work, given what he's doing. But it is immediate and I think long-term pain for a lot of people. And I also think the consequences of it in terms of the inflationary, the higher costs that are going to come now, including just everybody. A lot of people went out last week and bought a car because they were worried that tariffs were going to be on, and they
Right.
may well still be on. But my point is, all that mess that he created in the supply chain and everything else has just been a disaster. I do think that there was a meaningful amount of Trump supporters starting to, not moving, but starting to really question this. I do think caused the kind of questioning that means, again, what I've been saying all along, now's the time to get louder and to start talking and to start making this case to people. Not that you are an idiot, not that I told you so, but look, we've got to all come together here because, like it or not, he's not who you thought he was. He's even worse than I thought he was. Can't, we really need to come together as Americans and urge our representatives in both parties to take control back and stop him. And then we have to get loud too. So I just think there's a pathway here to start talking to people again, and that's what we have to do.
Let's get to some more listener questions. This is from Pat in Dallas, and I think he's talking mostly about the tariff thing, but he says, should we be worried about a left hand, right hand thing right now? I'm worried the media can only focus on one thing: tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. Meanwhile, Trump's sending innocent people to Salvadorian prisons. What else is lurking under the surface that we should be worried about?
Well, most of it's not lurking under the surface. Most of it's being done. And as you say, the press is having trouble. They report snippets of it if they report any of it. And so that's what I think, again, we have to you cannot count on the institutions like the press to, institutions are not capable of defending themselves. It's the people who have to defend the institutions. That sounds really strange, but that's the way it is. So we have to, if you,
Expand on that.
if you have to care, if you care about the courts, then start supporting the courts and the institutions that support the courts. If you care about the veterans, like the veterans are not the Veterans Administration, that institution is not going to be able to defend itself, particularly when it's been taken over by Trump political appointees who are trying to dismantle it, or education, or any of them. Get involved in supporting that institution. In other words, I understand the Tesla boycotts. I really do. But I'd actually much rather see a peaceful protest in front of a Veterans Administration building that is signaling to veterans that we have your back and that we will. The Tesla protest, we don't have a Tesla owners' backs. And I totally get the impetus and the reasoning
Well, and the other thing is
and
the Tesla
support it.
stuff. If you look at it from the other side, it's just another case of owning the libs.
Yeah.
And it's a case of it.
Well,
The reaction to the like, okay, you're protesting Tesla, and again, I get it. It's not one, it's not doing a whole hell of a lot, and two, the people that we need to win back are not saying, "Oh, you're protesting Tesla now. That's what's got me." Your
no, no. I
veterans
mean,
example is uh,
yeah.
much more kind of going down the right road when it comes to at least building that bridge back.
Oh, yeah, no, look, there's nothing wrong with boycott, with protesting Tesla. I mean, I get it. And hey, maybe that gets some Tesla folks to dump their cars and sell them,
Sure,
get
no,
out of
my
them.
point is don't
But
buy one, don't sell
yeah,
it, sure, but like that cannot be
no,
your performative good deed for the day and you call it a day.
yeah, no, my point would be you've got one body, you could put it in front of a Tesla dealership or you can put it in front of a Veterans Administration building. You're going to do a hell of a lot more good against what's going on by drawing attention to the veterans that are being hurt and damaged. And there's plenty of others, schools, et cetera. Your local post office, if it's being shut down, the local Social Security office. Yeah, that's the protesting in front of the Social Security office is going to signal and help actually get more people engaged, including seniors, right? And it's sort of focused on what's happening. I mean, the whole question is with all this stuff going on, how, and the press not being able to cover any of it. Well, we, the people, can stand and help defend these institutions, draw attention to what's going on with them, and give them support in the public sphere. That, by the way, will also get press attention. So the press won't be reporting on Tesla protests. They'll be reporting on hundreds of thousands, millions defending veterans, America's veterans against what this administration is doing. Patriots standing up to a dictator who's doing damage to our veterans. I mean, that's the messaging that I think is more important. I understand, the allure or draw of other things that need attention, but don't fight on their turf. I mean, I'd much rather be fighting for veterans, for seniors, than, yeah, than the own the lib stuff, which is what they'll turn it into.
Joe, continuing on that vein, this is from Charles in Tennessee. It seems like Democrats have an oxygen problem right now. They aren't getting any airtime with the Trump roller coaster, I think specifically talking about tariffs. This is by design, right? What can they do to break through?
No, it's not by design. It's they get how things work now. We are in a fragmented media environment. I mean, fragmented beyond belief. Everybody has an opinion and anybody can post it or move. The only way to do anything, to get any message through, is you have to, there's only two ways now left. It's not by getting a piece on ABC or even on the front page of the New York Times. That doesn't do anything. No, you have to be able to do something and get attention. In other words, we're in an attention environment, period, not an information war. We're in an attention. Now, Trump gets that. That's all he's ever been his entire life. How do I get all this attention on me? Unfortunately, the rest of the world did not learn that technique because we're not sick whack jobs, okay? But unfortunately, that's the media environment we're in. You either have to get attention or you have to be where people are paying attention to when they're not paying attention to anything. In other words, what my point is, you can't, again, I keep saying using these examples, but the World Wrestling Entertainment, the Ultimate Fighting Champion, UFC Championship, rodeos, etc., right? Those are all NASCAR. These are all places where people are paying attention to that. They're paying attention to the NASCAR race or WWE. Trump goes there and he communicates in those places. Why? Because that's where people are paying attention. not to him, not to politics, not to us, but to whatever they're paying attention to that thing. He's also we aren't. We won't go to those places. It's like the whole Joe Rogan show thing. It's not about, he went there, we won't. Harris didn't. It's not about whether Joe Rogan should be a place you go. It's more like there's a whole bunch of people paying attention right then and there. So be where they're at and talk to them. We don't do that very well. The second piece of this is he gets attention. Why? Well, first of all, he's the president of the United States, so he can say, but also people don't get this. He can post on Truth Social, and that means every reporter on the planet has to have an account on Truth Social. Why? Because they don't want to get beat by the next reporter on the other paper or the other, podcast or whatever, and not get caught with somebody else getting the story or what he posted before they do. So he creates these places and these mechanisms, and then of course he can just, hey, tariffs today. Okay. He does tariffs today, and we have 5,000 different responses to it. A podcast by Gavin Newsom over here, the Lincoln Project over there. I mean, what I'm saying is that we have not honed the pro-democracy side, the Democratic Party, whatever, hasn't honed that ability. So give you an example. Why did what Cory Booker did was so important with that filibuster? What did he get? He got attention for a couple of news cycles. Everybody was talking, and all over social media, Cory Booker got attention on a big problem, and he walked through it. And that's what we need more of. Now, we can get into this. That's one of the reasons I created Says Us, to create a central place for a pro-democracy social network and pro-democracy information distribution hub where we all gather there, share ideas, and then create that place where people can come and we can go out into the other networks, get attention, move the message, etc. But it's not just Says Us. It's not just Cory Booker, right? We have to get very good at understanding, be where people are paying attention, and do things that cause attention with a message. Therefore, I get the Tesla thing, but that is a protest message that says, Elon sucks, don't buy Teslas. Got it. I understand that. I too would like to see him lose billions of dollars, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Got it. But a million people in front of every veterans administration building or care center or even national cemeteries on one day or one weekend protesting what this government is doing to veterans benefits, I think will, one, get attention, just like the Tesla protested, but with that using that attention to drive a message that is much different than the Tesla protest would be, right? That's all. I'm not arguing. And again, we
No, that
do
makes
both,
sense.
but that's what I'm saying.
Joe, I know we have more listener questions that I know we'll get to in the future. It's really great, by the way, to see how many more people have been engaging, writing in, watching on places like YouTube. We will be expanding there and a few other places in the coming weeks, so stay tuned. But Joe, I think that's a pretty good place to end today.
Yeah, no, thanks. I've been thinking a lot about this, and I did post on Lincoln Square, and I'm also going to Alex and I are going to be launching our own place to post on either Ghost or Substack. I did post recently this on Lincoln Square, but I think it gets to what we're talking about. What you do now matters. It will take all of us, but we can build the movement that saves America and wrests power from Trump's toxic grasp. We are the cavalry, all of us, one by one, getting more Americans to see the danger and join us to save our country. The words of Abraham Lincoln's Lyceum Address should be made to ring in every American's ears. At what point, then, is the approach of danger to be expected, he said. I answer, if it ever reach us, it must spring up amongst us. It cannot come from abroad. If destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. As a nation of free men, we must live through all time or die by suicide. My friends, this is what I truly believe, that after 250 years, the American people are not going to willingly participate in the death by suicide of our great nation. Who will tell the people? Who will lead? You will. We will. It's time to urge every American to stand up for America. And I'm going to be posting more there, more on Says Us. I hope you'll join us there. And thanks for listening, everybody, to That Trippi Show. Remember, please, we're in the app stores, SEZ, second word us, in your app store. Join us at says.us or says.us. This podcast will always be free and is part of Lincoln Square. Check out the latest at lincolnsquare.media. We've had an awesome first few weeks due to your support. Thank you all. As always, please subscribe to That Trippi Show. Check out the Trippi Takes Substack. Leave a review on Apple or wherever you listen. And if you're listening to this episode on YouTube, please like and subscribe to get alerts when we post the next episode. You can always send us a question to thattrippishow@gmail.com or leave us a question in a review on iTunes. See you next week.